Very good. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to have all of you join us today for our Worksoft webinar on how to optimize your digital commerce apps and secure a seamless customer experience through performance testing. I am Mike Beck, Product Marketing Director at Worksoft, and your host for today's webinar. Today's presentation will be recorded, and we will send you a link for an on-demand session after this webinar is over. If you want to, go back and listen to the webinar or share it with teammates, that would be appreciated. Today we have actually quite a large number of participants, so we will mute all the lines. However, we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. So please use the question feature to submit any and all questions. If we don't get to all your questions at the end of the webinar, we will email you a reply as soon as we can. Now, let me introduce our speaker for today. His name is Badri Natur. He is head of digital at Worksoft. He is a former CEO and co-founder of Eureka. Badri has over 30 years experience in all areas of enterprise software, from design and development all the way to testing. He has worked at some of the leading global companies in retail, healthcare, manufacturing, education, and tech. So Badri, as we get started today, retailers and wholesalers are preparing for a busy holiday shopping season. Summer is the testing of your e-commerce apps, websites, mobile apps, making sure that your app experience is seamless for the holiday season or the Super Bowl for retailers. The period between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday sees some of the highest e-commerce traffic ever for retailers. And making sure that you're prepared to handle it is utmost important. So if you're a CIO or head of digital customer experience, and you want to make sure you don't spend your precious time explaining on MSNBC why your digital apps crashed or the customer experience was subpar, what should companies be doing now to harden their digital commerce experience as they prepare for the shopping season?
Thank you, Mike, and it's great being here speaking to everybody. And that's a great question. What should CIOs or anybody responsible for applications, e-commerce applications, be doing right now? You certainly don't want to be the person that gets pulled into the executive suite or the board meeting, or have your company being talked about on the news the following day for something that did not work right. So what do we do? So there are some things we're going to talk about that today. But first, let me talk about, give you an example. Prime Day. Everybody is familiar with it. It's not the holiday shopping season, but it might as well be. It's probably one of the busiest shopping days on Amazon. You get amazing deals. Everybody's looking forward to it. And the traffic levels at Amazon are incredibly high during this day. And you'd expect the #1 retailer to be completely prepared for it. But you know what? It's not so. There was one fateful day, Prime Day in 2018, which some of you might remember. Things did go horribly wrong at Amazon for a short period of time. The site itself was really slow, sluggish response time, and a lot of people, when they tried to go on Amazon, when the deal started at noon local time or noon Pacific time, this is what they saw, right? They saw, hey, sorry, something went wrong. We don't know what's going on. And this is not something that people were used to when they saw Amazon, when they went to Amazon. And it frankly had a lot of people confused. And like me, I was there on that day. And as I tried to refresh my browser, this is what I kept seeing. We all got introduced to the dogs of Amazon, so to say. So there obviously was something that did go wrong. And let's look at what actually went wrong and try to use that as a rubric to figure out what we should be doing. So, but what actually happened, while Amazon did not really release specific results other than, oh yeah, we had some minor problems, but our Prime Day was great. But estimates from other companies that track this, internet retailer, for example, that in that 63-minute period where this problem was occurring, the conversion rate dropped 25%. So what does that mean? It means people that came to the site did nothing, left off, or did some actions, saw a sluggish response, and left the site. So they did not actually spend money on that site. And it's estimated that Amazon lost up to $72 million in that 1 hour. So that's chump change for Amazon, but real money that they did lose. And it's, Google actually says this. It says most people, more than half the people leave your site within 3 seconds if they don't see the response. So getting that real quick response time is extremely important. And this, every second after 3 seconds, the number of people that leave your site or the rate at which your conversion rate drop is significant. So let's look at how we address this problem, right? To improve, to understand your application performance, to make sure your users have a great experience, you have to do performance testing. And what does that actually entail? So it means understanding how your application behaves under load, right? So let's break that up right now. Under load, so you need to understand what is the load that is being placed on your system. So this is typically user load, users coming on your application and transacting business. You need to understand how many users you're expecting. So if you look at what Amazon, will talk about this a little more, did Amazon know how many people were going to come on their site? Were they better plan? Do you know in what rate people come to your site? Do they all come at the same time? Is that visit to your site spread out? And what are they actually doing on the site? Because that also places load on your application. And what kind of transactions are they carrying out? How big are the orders that they're placing on your e-commerce site? So we'll talk about that a little more. And once you understand, and once you are able to say, this is the load that my system is facing, understanding what is the metrics that is important to you to really capture how your application behaves. Are you capturing the right response times? So there are a variety of metrics that you typically look at, time to first byte. How quickly does your site start loading, or how long does it take for the entire page to load? Or is there something in between? How quickly does that add to cart button show up? Or how, when you do a search, how quickly do results start showing up? We'll talk about a little of this and some of this as we go on, and really drill down into understanding the type of metrics you need to measure. And most importantly, you have to measure the metric that is most relevant to your user. It's not just about CPU utilization. It's not about memory utilization. It's about what is the user's experience and how are you measuring that user's experience? Because it doesn't matter what your CPU utilization is. If your user does not have a great experience, they're going to leave and you're going to lose money. So to understand this better, let's look at, again, this was what we talked about earlier, right? You don't want to show up in the news for the wrong reasons. But after that, after the first couple of days of sensationalizing Amazon's performance problems, CNBC ran a good article. So they did some investigation, and this was about 3 or 4 days after the Prime Day. They looked at the internal documents within Amazon, internal communications. Again, this is all investigative reporting, and they wrote a great article. We'll be happy to share this with you guys, or if you Google it, you'll find it. And in looking at this, we can actually work backwards to figure out what did Amazon do to address the problem immediately. And that gives us some lights of what is it that you should be doing to measure performance. So let's take a look at that. So the first piece here, it says Amazon responded to higher than expected traffic surge on Prime Day. So this says it all. They didn't expect to see this amount of traffic. And that traffic was a surge. It was not, it didn't happen over time. There was a sudden increase in traffic, and they were not able to respond to it. We'll talk about, or if you're interested, we can share, and the article also talks about what the actual reasons were. But when you look at this from a planning point of view, what's important for you is to be able to do a fairly good job at forecasting your user volume. So when you look at your user volume, typically if you ask any e-commerce retailer or somebody that's responsible for e-commerce applications, what kind of user volume do you see? Let's say, okay, on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, we could see 1 million users on our site. So is it million users in one day? That's great. What is it by hour? Are they evenly spread out? Do they all come at the beginning of the shopping time and then everything else dies out? So how do you determine that? What is the pattern of usage? It's important for you to know that, and also do better planning. So simulating, you need to be able to, as you are looking at evaluating your application's performance, it's important for you to simulate understand the user load and be able to simulate that correctly. Is there peaks? So when are you going to have peaks? When maybe you do flash sales. You say, hey, at 11 o'clock, we're going to come in and we're going to release a certain number of specials. So it's first come, first serve. You grab it. So you're going to have a real big peak in your traffic patterns at that point. Or it could be intermittent. You could say in every time zone, I'm going to release certain things. So that at 9 a.m., so 9 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central, you could have intermittent traffic, or you could have sustained traffic. So it completely depends on your application, whether it's your an e-commerce storefront, a partner portal, a vendor portal, or any other customer-facing application, or even an internal application where you are studying performance. It's very important for you to understand not just your user volume, which in this case, for those of you that are mathematically inclined, it's the area under those curves, but also understand those peaks and those valleys in there, and how your application behaves. The next thing you need to do is understand what is it that your users are doing on your system. What kind of what is the user journey? So if you're looking at e-commerce application, you all know there are some people that just come and browse around and shop. They come to your site, look at the categories and say, okay, I'm going to look at men's clothing, women's clothing, kids' shoes, and just look at things, and then they leave, right? There's a certain volume of traffic that just doing that. There's certain volumes that are coming looking for products. They may then start, okay, I'm going to start putting it into the shopping cart, and they'd say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get back to it later, and then they leave. So some of them then go through, actually complete your transactions. Others may get to your site from doing a search on Google, and they may come in straight into a product landing page and then move around from there. So it's important for you to understand the various common patterns of usage of your application, and then assign to say, okay, I'm going to say 30% of my traffic come here, and so on. So you have to break that down. All of this again comes down to planning the user load. So if you look back at what we were doing, we're talking about how Amazon was not able to predict the load. So here what you're doing is, not only are you saying how many users are coming to your site and what patterns, but what are they actually doing, right? So what user workflows are they going to follow? It's important for you to plan that out, and that will also tell you which of these workflows you have to simulate, which of these workflows you have to build, automate for your performance testing. We'll talk about that a little more. Another thing for you to also plan here is how many of these are users that are going to use a desktop application, how many of these are going to use a desktop browser or a mobile browser. Right now, more than 50% of e-commerce is on mobile, but for most e-commerce sites, people are not necessarily using a native mobile app. It's the mobile experience of a web application, and that is sometimes different from the desktop experience of web application. And you need to be able to simulate that traffic and measure and simulate that load as well. So one of the things we do with the Worksoft performance testing platform is that we provide you with a way to build these various workflows using our no-code automation, and also allows you to create these unique transactions and also determine what these loading patterns are. Look at and say, I want to have this percentage of users coming at this point, and you can specify what load of what number of transactions are being run for each of those different workflows, and also when they come in, what is that loading pattern. We'll talk about that in a bit. So here's some samples and reports that you can get out of our platform. You can actually plan to say, I have a certain number of users that are just coming to browse on the site. a certain number of users that are coming in to just place orders. So you can look at during any point in your test, you can generate this load of a certain number of users. In this case, you can see from this graph that we are slowly ramping up the usage. So this is a certain usage pattern that we have modeled in here. You can model any of those. You can create peaks and valleys, intermittent loads, or sustained loads. You can do that, and you can have a combination of workflows that create those loads. And the platform allows you to do this very easily. You can schedule workflows starting at certain time. You can say, starting 5 minutes, every minute I want to add another 20 users or another 500 users coming to my site. And after an hour, I want them to start dropping off. So you can actually do that, and you can actually, from a planning point of view, you can visualize that. So that really helps you before you run your test to get a good understanding of, here is the type of load that I'm expecting to place on my system. Is this realistic? Is this how my users are expected to behave? And you can do some what if analysis. Say, what happens if my usage goes up 20% or 30%? You can model that, and you can run a test for that. Or you can say, what happens if I get a surge in the first hour and then the traffic drops off rapidly and then again picks up? You can model that as well. So that's the first thing, understanding your user, the user levels, and being able to, and your workflows, and being able to model that correctly. So let's look at the next one. I'm going to go back to, again, that article, which was very enlightening, I should say, on the challenges that they faced. The next thing Amazon did after they first reduced the amount, they kind of shut off traffic coming in from Europe to reduce the load on their servers, excuse me. And then they switched to a simpler fallback page. So why did they do that? So they said that they did that to reduce the load. So how does a simpler page reduce load on your application? And let's kind of get into that a little bit. So if you think about what we call a simpler web page, when your browser places a request to your application responds with the entire content of the web page. So in simpler apps, there's not much dynamic content, fairly static content, which the server returns completely in one shot. So it doesn't, this particular model of an application doesn't pose a lot of load on the web server itself. So the client sends an HTTP request, and you get the entire page back, and you display it, and that's it. So it keeps things simple. There's not much dynamic content, not much content changing on the site. But what happens in modern user interfaces, in modern e-commerce applications, which I'm sure most of you have today? That first request is from the browser, is placed to the server, and the server fulfills that request, sends over a page. But not everything is sent over in one shot. If you look at this page also has a number of JavaScript most of the time. So what the modern apps rely heavily on this JavaScript to provide that rich user experience, to model that rich change that's constantly happening on the user experience. So for example, you look at, there are banner advertisements here. That banner advertisement, instead of staying static, now if you're on a page for some time, you can see that ad changing. So there's that banner ad, there's a JavaScript that's making constant calls to an API or to your server to pull the updated information and present that on the page. The user does nothing, but the browser is automatically continuously making these requests. So all these requests now start placing additional load on your application. So this is what Amazon was trying to do. By moving to a simpler page, they were reducing these calls that reduce the load on the server. There could also be calls being made to external third-party API. So in this case, you could say, okay, I'm going to give you, commonly you could see on certain e-commerce site, if you have a partnership with something like, say, Klarna, you could say, okay, you buy now, and you can pay in installments. So there are ads where if you pay more than, if the cost is more than $100 or $200, there could be some other promotions that show up. So this is all dynamic content that could be served up from third-party APIs. You could also have users go in and say, let's say I want to click on another product, and at this point that may trigger a JavaScript that pulls in information from your web server and updates the product, changes the product and changes the product details, all without doing a complete page load. So this is something that you commonly run into when you have, say, a React-based application or other applications where you don't have a complete page load, but your content is dynamically changing either automatically or based on user actions. And all of this different variable type of load is now adding additional, all these transactions are adding additional load on the server. So typically, when you look at, you want to be able to simulate this kind of load on your servers. In the past, we've used protocol-based load generators, which generate traffic at an HTTP level. So they will say, okay, I'm going to simulate a client and I'm going to send an HTTP request. I'm going to get the page and I'm going to look at the response times on that. And I can generate a lot of load. I can have these load generators that will simulate 50, 100, or 1,000 clients from one machine just by sending HTTP requests. The challenge there is those requests don't capture the true load placed on the JavaScript. They're only capturing part of the load. If you want to capture the real load of all these JavaScript, you have two options. One, you simulate every single one of those JavaScripts. So you are actually doing a hell of a lot of additional programming to be able to simulate that. Or you do what we do. So we use actual browsers to generate this load. So if you're simulating a load of, say, 10,000 users, we launch 10,000 browsers and let the browser handle the actual behavior of these JavaScripts, which is what happens when users are using modern applications, so modern UI. So we are the approach we use of using browser-based load generators keeps this very true to real life and generates a real life loading pattern on the servers, and it gives you a more accurate representation of this load on the servers. So that's what you see with our performance testing solution. You've actually built the workflows, a variety of workflows, the way exactly your users are using it. You've created the loading patterns. You determine when they are coming and how they're using the your e-commerce site, and then you're generating the load. You're able to simulate. You say, I want to load up in this pattern. I want to increase to certain peak levels, intermittent levels, or sustained levels, and generate web traffic, mobile traffic, API, because all of this is done through our no-code automation workflow, which can build automation for web, mobile, and API. And you can have transactions that span all three of these, like you would do your real functional scenarios, end-to-end scenarios. You can have those modeled and generate load on any of these. The next thing you do is, if you look at, so far you've looked at what workflows am I doing. Let's say I'm going to go through the workflow of a simple user that's making a purchase on a website. So I'm going to search for some products. I'm going to add it to the shopping cart. I'm going to check out, pay, and leave. Now, what happens is when you're now running tens of thousands of these transactions, right? If you're testing this for an hour or 2 hours, it's very likely that you're actually going to generate not tens of thousands, hundreds or even millions of transactions in a few hours, depending on your user load levels. And you want variability. You can't have this, them entering in the same data. So you need to be able to have that variability in those hundreds or millions of hundreds of thousands or millions of transactions. You can do that with our data-driven testing. You can create that dynamic data, and that will also help you do a few other things. And I will talk about that in a minute. So one of the challenges that is frequently ignored, one of the problems that is frequently ignored, is the load that is faced not just by the number of users, but by the actual transaction itself. So let me give you a simple example. So let's say you're testing a CRM system, where you go and you want to see how quickly, when you search for a customer, how quickly does your results show up. So if you're searching for a customer in a database that has maybe 1,000 customer records, data comes up quickly. What happens if your customer database has tens of thousands of records? How quickly does your response come up? What happens if the search that you do has to result, gives you a result of 5 customers or gives you a result of 500 customers? How long, what is the variability there? Or another great example, we've done this for some of our other customers in the B2B commerce space. This customer, when you shopped for when you're shopping for a product, they showed you all products available. But when you place an order, that's when they actually looked at the inventory to figure out if the item was available and then place the order. This is great. So you place an order with, say, 5 items. It does 5 inventory lookups and places an order. That's fine. Now, what happens in a B2B setting if you're placing an item with 500 orders? You're doing 500 inventory lookups, and then you're placing the order. So that adds additional load to that one simple step of place an order. What happens when you're doing this when there are 5,000 users on the site? So this is another metric that is frequently ignored, but it's something that you absolutely have to pay attention to, and we allow you to do that. So in our platform, you can actually determine, we can set certain attributes as key attributes, and then you vary them with your data, and then you can report on this. So here you see a graph that you can see as the order size increased, went from 10 to 400, you can see the response times increasing. So for a certain level, it stays low, but as soon as you go about 200 items, you can see the response times rising very quickly. So this gives you some indications. It's not just about the transaction, it's still one transaction, but what you do within that transaction is different, and you need to pay attention to that. It helps you identify bottlenecks. It could be performance bottlenecks, it could be how your query is running, it could be indices in some backend database. It gives you insights to all of that. So far you've looked at, we need to be able to generate the users correctly. You need to look at you need to understand what workflow they're using, be able to simulate it, be able to scale seamlessly, and be able to vary data, right? All of that generates load. So once you have generated that load, now you need to look at how am I going to make sense of the application's response. So we need to be able to measure the application's response and start making sense of that. To that, you need to be able to capture the correct metrics and be able to analyze that and be able to generate reports with actionable analytics. And we'll talk a little more about that. So here's some, in the Worksoft platform, what we enable you to do is, as you define your workflows, within a workflow, you can define usage steps. So let me give you an example. We showed that image where you have the browser, you have some products that are showing up, and when the user clicks on another product, it needs to refresh the content on the page. So how long does it take to refresh? So that's something that we consider that as a usage step, because there's an action that the user takes and the response to that action. What is that time? So that is something that we determine as a usage step, and we allow you to capture metrics. And you can take an existing functional workflow and assign usage steps and say, these are the steps within this workflow where I'm interested in collecting metrics. And you can collect detailed metrics that they're automatically captured for every single transaction. So as I said, we're running these tests on browsers, individual transactions on individual browsers. So there's nothing, we're not like generating tens of or hundreds of users out of one machine. They're all separate. So nothing, one doesn't impact the other. We capture metrics on every single one of them and then analyze those. You have the ability to, across workflows, you can look at how many sessions did you run. So in this, you can see we went up to a maximum of 2,500 users. At any point, you can see what was the response time at a workflow level, at an individual usage step level. So you could also have usage steps that go across different workflow. Like you saw in the example where I showed all the different workflows, searching for a product or adding something to a shopping cart. That could be being used in multiple workflows, and you want to be able to look at the response for that action across workflows or just within the workflow. We allow you to do both of those, and we give you response times in aggregated as well as individual transactions. You can also look at if there are any failures. So there's a lot of detailed data that is generated and that is captured. This is accurate data as to what is relevant to your user. So your user doesn't care how long it takes for the page to load. All they're looking for is, hey, does that button that if I want to add something to shopping cart, is that button show up? So when I click on that, does it give me a prompt saying that the product has been added to the cart? That's all they're worried about. And that's what you should be worried about, and making sure that you are able to capture those response times accurately and then process it. And then you can look at, you have a lot of graphs, charts that allow you to look at each of these metrics. So for each of these usage steps, you can look at, for example, here, I'm logging in as a registered user. So I want to see, excuse me, as my load goes up. So if you recall, we had the loading pattern of going up to 2,500. This shows you what the loading pattern is for the overall load. And you can also see the blue line here showing the loading pattern for that individual usage step. And you can look at, as the load goes up, you can see here that there are some problems as you get past a certain load. It gives you a very quick view to see, okay, that's where I need to focus on, figure out what's going on at that point and try to address that. So these graphs give you a good bird's eye view into problem areas, and then you can drill down into details by looking at actual data, and your technology team can actually look at it and say, okay, that's where I see the problem, correlate it to other areas in the code, and identify what next actions have to be done to address it. So these charts are response times are aggregated and presented in box chart, where you can look at median value of 25th, 50th percentile or 75th percentile, look at outliers and so on, and see what is acceptable. So you work with your business team, your marketing team to set baselines as to what acceptable levels for these are for each of these actions are, and then you have now details to look at what the actual value is, so that you can now see if it is comparable, if it's acceptable, if not, what actions you have to take. And you also have the ability to vary load levels easily, loading patterns easily. So you're not just running your performance test once, you're running it multiple times with different types of loading patterns, different levels of loading, and then you're able to study these response times and compare those and really get actionable intelligence out of the real metrics that you have collected for accurate loading levels that you have done. So in a nutshell, what you're doing with performance testing, as we talked about earlier, is you need to be able to accurately create user loading levels, right? So you need to be able to understand how your user, what the load patterns are, how your users are going to come to your site, use your site, whether it's over a period of 5 days, a period of a week. What happens? Is there certain times that is more busier than others? Are there certain peaks, valleys, or do you have a minimum sustained level? So sometimes things may work great if you're at a certain load level for an hour, 2 hours. What happens when you go 20 hours? What happens when you go 2 days at a stretch at, say, 500 users or 1,000 users? How do your systems hold up? They could be, in the old days, there could be some little memory leaks that build up over time, some problems that build up over time, and then show up 20 hours into the test or 2 days into the test. You want to be able to test those and tease those out, and you can do that easily. And you can also vary your transaction data, your user journeys, workflows, and then actually capture metrics and make sense out of this. And the great thing about the Worksoft platform is that all of this is completely available to you, including the cloud infrastructure for you to run your tests. So it's not like I need to sit down, I need to provision servers, I need to handle all of that. You don't have to do any of that. It's all available in one platform that allows you to very easily and very quickly plan, execute your tests, make sense of it, and do this in an ongoing manner so as you continue to improve your application performance. And so when you get into that time where you have to roll out your new site or be prepared for a peak shopping season, you're confident that your site will hold up. So it's hold up to the performance that you expect it to deliver, and deliver the user experience that your users are expecting from your applications. So with that, I'm going to pause and open it up to questions. Mike, are there any? And I'd be happy to go back into more detail about any other areas as well.
Thanks, Badri. Well done. Yeah, we have a couple of questions come in. One is actually not a question, it's more of a comment. Thanks for making somewhat of a complicated topic a little bit easier to understand. So good job there. I know this is a dense topic, and I'm sure you could have gone deeper into details, but I think I think it was well done. So
happy to geek out.
Yes. Let's see. I'm using a cloud app for e-commerce and CRM. Do I still need to worry about performance testing?
Good question. Good question. Yes, I would say so. One of the common questions that come. It's a question that I've heard a number of times. People say, "Hey, I'm using Salesforce. I'm using Oracle Cloud, or I'm using another Workday or another cloud app, SaaS app. They take care of everything. So why should I have to worry about it's running on their cloud? It's highly scalable. Why should I worry about performance?" So when you think about it, it's at the outset, it looks like, yeah, they're on a huge cloud. So why should I worry about it? But what you're using is an application that's been configured to your needs. There are customizations that are done. There are configurations that are made. So I talked about doing a search and then getting the results back. When you do a search, how many results does that are shown? How complex of a query is being run in the back end to get that data? How have you configured your data within those CRM applications, or even for that matter, e-commerce applications, for you to be able to show those results? Those configurations are specific to your implementation of those applications. So absolutely, you need to be able to do performance testing. Secondly, you could have other customizations. So you're running an e-commerce applications, you could be using additional plugins or adapters that are available in a lot of the cloud commerce solutions. So you could be using a specific search component. There could be a tax calculation component that relies on a third party to provide the tax information. How does that perform when you have tens of thousands of users hitting your site? Is that able to do are the APIs for those third-party applications, which you're not responsible for, but your users' experience completely depends on how well they perform. So you need to know how those hold up or stand up when there are loads. So absolutely, you should be doing some level of performance testing, at least for your primary user flows, even if you're using a cloud application.
Perfect. Okay. This may be a simple question. I'm wondering if it's a complicated response, but can you do performance testing for a single page app?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Short answer, yes. So I think if you go back to that slide where I talked about, if you recall, where I talked about the dynamic data, the JavaScripts on the page that are loading up. So with a single page app, as the name suggests, there's just one page in the app. So there are not multiple pages. So you don't have page loads. It's not a new page that's getting served up. Every element on the page is available in the on that application at all time on the browser. It's just certain things that turn on or off depending on the state of the application. So if you're testing a single page app, you absolutely must do it. You cannot do that through a protocol-based approach, right? So you cannot create that load, that dynamic load that is all going on and that's being generated by the single page app using a protocol-based approach, because there's just one page load and that's it. You can't capture anything else. But if you use our approach of using a browser, you will be able to simulate accurately the load, not only the load that is being placed by these actions on a single page app, but you'll also be able to accurately measure the specific responses. Like I placed an order, added something, I placed an order. How long does it take for me to get that order number back? How long does it take for the order to get placed? How long does it take for the search to show up results? All of which is really dynamic data in a single page app. And yes, you can do that with our platform, but you need to use that browser-based approach for performance testing.
I had a suspicion it might be a bit of a complicated answer. So another question, I think this is a good one. Is it possible to combine mobile API testing with performance testing to validate the full experience of a customer journey?
Yes. Short answer, yes, it is possible. Long answer, again, this is something that you absolutely have to do, because if you think about in your applications, it's not necessarily just one user interface that you provide. Most of your users are going to, even if you just have a web application, users are going to come in using a mobile device, and you may choose to provide a different mobile experience. And so it's important for you to generate the load caused by these mobile devices, and we can do that. And same thing with API as well. So if you are interfacing, if you have a headless commerce solution, you need to actually be able to simulate that end-to-end shopping workflow on that headless commerce solution. So you're interacting directly at the API level. Yes, you can do that.
Great. Vajay, I'm thinking as a way to wrap up this great session, can you maybe summarize the difference between a traditional performance testing tool and what Worksoft offers?
Sure. So traditionally, performance testing has been in, has looked at different ways. They are, as I said, protocol based. So they generate load at a protocol level. And this was great when you're working with client server software, when you're just generating certain load, sending load from a request from the client and getting the response back. So I think this is, if I may go back to a slide here, I think this showcases it well. So if I may show this.
Please.
So as I was talking here, with the traditional or protocol-based testing tools, the traffic is just generated at an HTTP layer. So all the dynamic, rich features on your website, the traffic generated by that are not captured in that approach. So you miss probably over 50% of the load that is created on your servers. So if you are doing this, sometimes certain solutions use purely protocol-based load generation, and some of them use a combination. They say, okay, I will generate 90% of my load through this, but then I'm going to also have a few 10% of my load is going to be through browsers where I'm going to capture. You may capture some of the results as seen on the actual browser, but you still missed out on a lot of the load. So our approach, since every single user interaction is simulated by a unique browser, the load that is generated is accurate, it's realistic, and then the response you capture again is realistic. You get accurate results because you're able to now capture the intricate details, like when you click on this product, to how long does it take for this image to load up, right? That is something where there is no HTTP traffic, separate traffic going on between the request response between the browser and the application is just being captured by a JavaScript. You'll be able to capture that within our tool. And that's a big differentiator if you're testing modern apps built on React.js, the React framework, single page applications, or anywhere you have your applications that also have a lot of JavaScript on it. Today, if you look at your e-commerce applications and look at every single little JavaScript or a pixel, a third-party pixel that is sitting on, all of those are creating traffic back and forth. You need to be able to simulate that accurately when you do your performance tests, and we do that. So what you get with our approach is more realistic user load, accurate results, and then with our analytics, we actually give you actionable steps that you can take, identify where your problems are and what you need, and then you figure out what you need to do to fix those.
Excellent. Thank you, Badri. Great session again. Hopefully everyone got some really good value. We will follow up by sending you an email with a link to a recorded session of this webinar. If you have questions, just contact your Worksoft representative, salesperson. They'll gladly follow up with you. And we look forward to you joining us on the next session in September. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all.